Welcome to Thinking Like a Lawyer, with your hosts Ellie Mistal and Joe Patrice, talking about legal news and pop culture, all while thinking like a lawyer, here on Legal Talk Network.
Hello, welcome to another edition of Thinking Like a Lawyer. I'm Joe Patrice from Above the Law. I'm joined by Catherine Rubino. How are you?
I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Excellent. So it's been another week.
So did anything happen in the legal world in the past?
Not that I know of.
It's pretty quiet. It's pretty quiet.
Yeah. No, so what all did happen? I've been hearing a name for the last week. I'm not sure. Is there a place called Jones Day? Is that a
I think you're pronouncing it wrong. I think it's Jones.
Jones? Yeah, no. Yeah.
No. Jones Day has been in the news quite a bit.
Yeah.
Over the last week. I did wonder for a hot minute, like, what are we going to talk about on today's podcast? And then I was like, the 75 stories I've written about Jones Day is probably something we can chit-chat about.
Jones Day, for those who don't know, I can't imagine many people listening to this don't know
I
who
imagine
they are.
the sort of the diagram of folks that know what Jones Day is and who listen to us are a perfect circle.
Yeah, or at least the listening to us one is a subset of the other circle.
Sure, yes, obviously.
I'm not going to go ahead and assume that we're the whole circle. But we should be, and that's why you should be telling all of your friends to listen.
You're getting the plug in early today.
Yeah. Well,
Good
you gave me an opportunity. So listen, so Jones Day is making themselves famous, not in the best of all ways right now. They're in even mainstream news sources. New York Times wrote an article about them. Tell us a little bit about what put Jones Day in this.
Yeah, well, it all started with that New York Times article. It was about Jones Day and Porter Wright, two big law firms. Obviously, Jones Day is significantly larger, just in terms of number of lawyers, number of offices, et cetera. And so there was a Times article that quoted several partners and senior associates anonymously that complained about Jones Day's representation in election litigation cases. So Porter Wright, lots of things have happened with them. They've since withdrawn from their election litigation representation, but Jones Day has not. Jones Day was very, very clear that they do not represent President Trump.
Oh, okay. So they don't really represent anybody in the election stuff. Oh, okay. There was a pause.
Yeah, no. They represent the Pennsylvania GOP in that case about Pennsylvania litigation about whether or not which votes should be counted, whether or not, all that kind of stuff that's going on.
So they said that they weren't representing the Trump campaign, but what they're doing is representing the Pennsylvania GOP in the lawsuit that is the basis of all of the Trump campaign's complaints.
Yeah.
So kind of a distinction without much difference.
Yeah. No, for sure. That is definitely what's going on here. And that's why, you wrote about that as well. It was kind of a funny response that they had when they were like, we expect a retraction immediately. And I was like, I actually didn't even say in the original article that they represented the Trump campaign or Donald Trump specifically. And well, to be fair, in this particular election litigation, there are obviously other cases. They get a lot of money from the Trump campaign generally, but in any of these election litigations. But, at worst, this is satisfied by the Trump campaign or its allies.
Yeah.
Parenthetical, so it's a bunch of nothing. So there was an article in the Times that quoted a bunch of senior attorneys at the firm complaining about the representation of these sort of election fraud claims. And the concerns I think a lot of us share is that these sorts of litigation is extending the election process without any having real basis in legal theory, having kind of a specious claim in the first instance. But even if you were to grant the full weight of their arguments are not large enough to turn the election.
Right.
And so extending these really undermines democracy. There's disturbing polls about the number of people who believe that the election was rigged or that there was some sort of impropriety or there are somehow illegal votes where there's zero evidence that there are any illegal votes. So, all these things have become a real problem for the firm. I think in one of my early articles about Jones Day's representation in election cases, I said, the reason why I went to law school was not to undermine democracy and the peaceful transition of power, which is characterized American democracy.
Some people do go for that reason. reason. I mean, I don't think you should cast aspersions on everybody.
Sure. I mean, listen,
There's a lot of
I've
reasons to
not
go to
read
school.
their law school admission essays, but listen, your mileage may vary. So there's been a lot of controversy internally, and that has spread, beginning with that Times article. The Lincoln Project, you may remember them. They're a PAC that has raised money. They've said that they are going to spend upwards of $500,000 on ad campaigns directed at not only Jones Day, but their clients as well.
Well, this brings me to the interesting question, which is, so there's this pressure campaign on the firm to, get out of these sorts of cases, largely because there's, and targeting clients. So it strikes me, and we have reason to believe, and some tips that we have received, that there's internal strife about this, that there are many people in the firm who are not happy that this is going on. At this point, why would a partner who has a book of business that is wholly unrelated to these political stuff, that's corporate clients and just general corporate clients, what's their motivation to stay there?
I don't know. I'm not sure what that is. Maybe there's some inertia. Moving firms is a lot of effort. But I'm not sure. I don't know. I don't know why anyone who's not a sort of true believer is excited about this representation. I think it's hurting the firm's brand. I mentioned the Lincoln Project. Midas Touch is another PAC that put out a video, which is quite damning, about Jones Day itself. There have been boycotts that have been circulated. The People's Parity Project, a group of law students who are advocating that other 2Ls in particular, but anyone avoid interviewing with Jones Day, so that they're not necessarily having access to sort of the best and the brightest anymore. If this actually holds, there have been a bunch of direct action campaigns that have started protesting in front of the offices of King and Spalding. They did in D.C., as well as Jones Day's New York office. So this is definitely more than just a kind of a niche lawyer issue. This is very much spiraled above and beyond. And as you said, there are definitely folks internally, and I wrote a story on Friday about an associate, not a partner, mind you, but an associate who sent an all-office email. There'd been an associate town hall about the representation. They were told that they would get to answer questions, and then that did not happen. So instead, there was somebody sent an email complaining about the representation. And so we know that there are folks internally.
Yeah. So I ask because some people know I also have a consulting job with folks who look at, who help move partners and stuff around. And it's weird. I found that I haven't been contacted by anybody for that particular reason, who is just reaching out saying, like, I've worked hard to build several million in business, and I don't want it to go away. Yeah. But it is weird that I haven't heard as much in that world of people trying to get out, especially because, as you said, there's, lawyers, with a few exceptions, lawyers don't like to be famous in these sorts of ways. You don't really want to be the people talked about in the New York Times. You want to put your head down and be mentioned maybe in one line of a Wall Street Journal article about some merger. That's kind of where you want to be. And this is not great for them.
Yeah, it's that kind of little c conservative that especially big law firm lawyers tend to be, where they aren't seeking that attention. They want to do their job, be the best at it. But
and we see also that this has been, to parallel to another story that has been percolating for years, but was recently featured in the mainstream media again, which is that the drive for improving diversity within law firms is being driven by the clients. The clients saying, we're the ones out here who get attention, and we don't want to keep seeing the law firms that we hire be, predominantly white male partnership teams. And they're making that pressure, which is proof that the way to make reforms within law firms is to go through the pocketbooks by going to the clients and pushing that. So given that that's going on at the same time, you see how if the clients start seeing it as toxic to be related to a firm, it snowballs. And
that's certainly what Lincoln Project has taken away from a lot of those stories. They haven't produced any videos or any ads as of yet that I'm aware of, but in their initial tweeting about it, specifically called out the Ford Motor Company. Hey, Ford, Why are you hiring lawyers that are trying to undermine our democracy? Why are you trying to, buy your pocketbook, undermining free and fair elections?
And I think if anybody knows anything about Henry Ford, they know that he would not support a fascist takeover of the country. All right, so perhaps a bad example. But yeah, so Jones Day is in a weird place. And as you said, Porter Wright withdrew, Snell Wilmer withdrew. Like various of these firms already have said, okay, that's it. We're out. We don't want to deal with this.
The cost is too high.
Yeah, and Jones Day is holding with it, which is,
very on brand for them, though, right?
Well, it's on brand, but it's going to be interesting to see how this plays out, because things aren't necessarily great out there economically for a law firm, and so why would you put yourself in this sort of position? So how have law firms weathered previous economic downturns and come out stronger on the other side? LexisNexis Interaction has released an in-depth global research report confronting the 2020 downturn, lessons learned during previous economic crises. Download your free copy at interaction.com/likealawyer to see tips, strategies, plans, and statistics from leaders who have been through this before and how they've reached success again. So,
am I allowed to talk now?
See, now, this sort of blaming of the victim here.
Interesting. I'm not comfortable with you taking that particular tact.
Speaking of victim blaming, and relatedly to this, a story that is blowing up at this point, aside from Jones Day, there are several lawyers who are involved in this sort of litigation, one of which is a small family law practitioner in Philadelphia who's representing the Trump campaign, and she would like to speak to a manager. This woman, Linda Kearns, has filed a motion complaining that a Kirkland and Ellis associate left a voicemail, saying things like what we're saying, why you try to overthrow democracy. And she feels hurt by this, but more importantly, she says that because Kirkland and Ellis is involved in litigation on the other side, that this is a breach that they should be sanctioned for.
Seems like a bold move.
Yeah, I mean, look, she says that the voicemail was abusive. Kirkland Ellis is like, we don't think that's true, and we will give you a transcript so that you know that's not true. So she views it as abusive. And yes, if the opposing counsel is being abusive, that is something. In this instance, not only is Kirkland saying that this call was in no way abusive, but also this person is just not in the litigation department, knows nothing of the case, didn't even know the firm was representing anybody in this case. Just somebody who called back to the Lincoln Project, as a result to some of the things they've been calling for.
Yeah, there's a lot of direct action folks who are putting out phone numbers of folks and saying, please let them know that this is unacceptable, undermining our democracy, yada, yada, yada. No, and it seems to me like this is sort of a real risk when your firm is involved in these big political cases, that especially a firm like Kirkland, frankly, even like Jones Day that has thousands of lawyers, right? Not every lawyer is plugged into all of these cases. Not every lawyer even is aware of what's going on, but they still have their own personal, individual civic rights and civic, sense of responsibility that I think is being...
Well, so one of the questions that this lawyer raises, not giving it, obviously, I don't think that this is a particularly compelling claim, but, let's tease this out. This is the whole process.
This is our pretend we're a law professor
thinking
section
like a lawyer, yeah. One point that is made in the reply brief, which, has some ring to it, which is that the size of a law firm should not be able to be used as an excuse to get out of ethical obligations. You shouldn't be able to say, well, I have 2,000 lawyers, so therefore, can't really be held to the same standard of every lawyer is responsible to every client within the firm. Yeah, I get that. I think that that's probably true for some things. Yes, we have to have complex conflict checks to avoid somebody from a different far-flung area of the firm representing an adverse party, something like that. Like that is something that's necessary. It seems as though something like this like vague complaint about civility is the sort of thing that, yes, the size actually does matter.
Insulate you from some of those claims. Also, I think that Kirkland's fundamental argument that this is not an abusive...
Right, which that's the real...
Yeah. Seems to me like that wholly answers the issue.
Totally. Look, yeah, they said it was discourteous. That's about it. And that's fine. But I mean that we're doing the thinking like
Sure.
a lawyer part.
I think that both of those things are true, right?
Right.
We've kind of answered the first one, which is that when you're talking about a very minor potential violation, even assuming all the facts, in what's her name, Linda Kern's favor, even assuming everything in her favor, I think that in this particular instance, no, it doesn't rise to that level. And I also think that when you're dealing with matters of, this is not some sort of individual right that doesn't impact all of the country, right? And that folks' individual opinions about the running of our country are obviously something that is protected. And people don't give up those rights just because they work for a giant law firm.
If there needs to be a rule saying that Kirkland and Ellis associates should not call opposing counsel and leave an abusive voicemail, then all hope is lost.
I mean...
Yeah, no.
This woman seems a little crazy.
Yeah, this does have some real hyperbolic tendencies. And look, I don't know about you. I was involved in a litigation where the opposing side was actively abusive. Frivolous motions all the time, in your face, mean-spirited, like one of those lawyers. And of those lawyers, but you just kind of, especially in the big law world, you know that you rarely run into them. But in this instance, we did, and it was, unpleasant at all times. And at no point did we file a motion complaining that he was a meanie. Because, you just suck it up with a lot of
Also,
stuff.
how many voicemails did she go through to find the one from Kirkland?
Right.
Because I would be gobsmacked if this was the only voicemail that she's received saying, "What are you doing? Why are you undermining our democracy?" Yeah, I mean... I'd be shocked if this is the only person who's done that.
Right, which makes it feel a lot more like this was an active attempt at, setting up some sort of martyrdom motion.
Yep.
Just trying to find anybody who has any connection to the other side and say, "Oh, look at this, I need sanctions." Yeah, no, it's real problematic. But hey, this is where we are these days.
This is the world we live in.
Yeah, but these are litigation things. For those of you in litigation, you're familiar with people who are jerks like this, and for the poor person who called, who wasn't even in the litigation department, from what I gather from the motion, maybe they don't know
someone like trusted estates just slaving away, being
they wouldn't have had an idea of how to work with it. And I don't really understand that world because I was on the litigation side, but I mean, it's out there. And if you work with contracts and don't use contract tools, you're missing a lot. Save time, make money, and do a better job for your clients with Contract Tools by Paper Software. Contract Tools is the most powerful word add-in for working with contracts. Thousands of lawyers all over the world rely on Contract Tools every day for every kind of deal. Visit papersoftware.com to watch a demo and get a free trial. As a special offer to podcast listeners, use coupon code LTN2020 to get 1 month free. That's papersoftware.com and LTN 2020.
That was pretty smooth.
Yeah. I mean, not to pat myself on the back.
I mean, you're going to strain yourself trying to pat yourself that far back.
Wow. Okay. So what else is going on in the world of law?
I don't know, man. I feel like if it's not Jones Day, I know nothing about it. There have been several kind of big stories that have come up that I was like, oh, I want to write about that. And then something else happens at Jones Day. And 3 articles later, I'm like, oh, I don't even remember what that story was anymore.
Yeah.
And that's sort of been par for the course, I think, over this whole election cycles. Folks find themselves easily distracted by all the noise coming from it.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's very fair. I guess one thing that I spend a little bit of time working on is there's a lawsuit in North Carolina to get a Confederate statue taken down, which...
That seems like a good thing.
And it's very interesting because obviously the approach to Confederate statues of late have kind of been divided into two strategies, basically relying on feckless politicians or, toppling them like Saddam statues. And this case presents a possible middle way of dealing with it by leveraging the promises of state constitutions against the maintenance of these statues. And not all state constitutions will necessarily have these provisions, but North Carolina, for instance, like a lot of states in the immediate aftermath of the Civil War, the Reconstruction governments wrote these constitutions with some sweeping promises within them of equal protection and so on. And in North Carolina's case, there was even a later provision added to the Constitution of the state that mirrored and made a constitutional right the civil rights legislation of the 50s and 60s, is kind of integrated into it.
So this is a great trial.
Yeah. So the argument, and there's a lot of lawyers on it, including a former deputy attorney general of the state. And the argument is really to kind of create this model of how to approach litigation to force the taking down of these of this statue. And one of the provisions of the North Carolina state constitution is support for secession is barred for public officials and stuff. And their argument is this statue is nothing if not support for secession movements, which is true.
Compelling.
So they're making this pitch that hopefully they can get this particular statue taken down. And the hope is that if this works, other North Carolina jurisdictions could launch similar legislation, litigation off of the same model, and other states might have similar provisions. So, very interesting case to keep an eye on. I read it this morning and put some stuff up about it. It's kind of back to your point about like you didn't go to law school for this. I think this is exactly the sort of thing people do go to law school for.
And it turns out some people actually get to practice that kind of law.
And there are civil rights lawyers involved, but there's also consumer protection lawyers in this case. It's bringing together a good team of folks. There's 3 organizations and 3 or 4 individual plaintiffs. So there's a lot of lawyers who have all kind of been working together, from what I gather on this, to get this case ready to go.
Well, that's exciting.
Yeah.
It's good to have some good news at the end of our podcast. I think, makes people a little hopeful.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Cool.
What, are you not?
No. I mean, that's, yeah.
Are you just not into good news? I'm very confused by this reaction. I did not think it was a controversial statement.
It wasn't. It was just a weird one. Like, I didn't know how you expected me to respond to that. Just like, yes, or I don't know. See, this is this is how the thing with conversation is when there's no obvious cue for the next person, it becomes a mess.
You are a mess. That's correct.
Wow.
I win podcasting.
Yeah, so whatever.
The other thing that happened in the world of law firms last week.
Cool.
Bonuses started.
Oh, that's an excellent point.
By the way, at Above the Law, the fact that bonuses started last week is not our over-the-top number one story is shocking and shows you just how much this Jones Day an election debacle has dominated folks' lives.
That's very true. Like, bonuses are consistently, for the years that we've been doing this, the number one
story of the month, year, week, whatever it is. It didn't even crack the top. I think it was like the 10th story this week.
Wow. Yeah, no. So Baker McKenzie came out with its announcement of annual bonuses. It is tracking last year's schedule of bonuses. That is somewhat eyebrow-raising to the extent that we had some fall bonuses, and the firms that did the fall bonuses said we would also do annual bonuses, at least, which means Baker McKenzie's kind of suggesting, even though they do in their statement say they aren't foreclosing more money, but they are seemingly saying, we're going to stick with last year's and just hope you all forget that your colleagues got more.
Yeah, it seems to me like a really weird position to take such an early stance on bonuses if you aren't going to lead the pack.
Right. Well, I think it's the flip side. You're trying to control the pack.
Well, perhaps, but also, I mean, it's literally saying, because we know that some of the people who are early on the fall bonuses, Milbank, I think, said it. Some of the other folks early said that, we will at least give you end of year bonuses at last year's rate. So that means that's the rate that Baker McKenzie came out with. Mm-hmm. So that means that Baker McKenzie's associates are at least down the value of the fall bonuses at a minimum. There may be larger bonuses in the offing. We don't know. But at a minimum, it seems like they're getting in front of the pack to say, hey, isn't it good to be, I mean, it's up to upwards of $40,000 less.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
it's not like chump change. It's not like,
no,
that's a lot of money.
Yeah. It is going to be interesting to see when the, you hate to say this about a firm, like to cast this sort of aspersion, but I'm interested in what the big kids come out and say. When Cravath and Milbank and these traditional players.
Well, Cravath is already down the fall bonuses as well. They said
Right.
we'll deal with it at the end of the year, and I do think that Cravath will come out and give numbers that are whatever the fall bonus value plus whatever last year
That's
is.
my guess too.
I mean, I think that they will not take this kind of Baker McKenzie path. I think they will be they will account for these fall bonuses, but who knows? And, I think Milbank already came out with the fall bonuses. Davis Polk, they are the ones who came up with the amounts for the larger
that's
bonuses.
worth remembering. Davis Polk while we often talk about Cravath being the first mover when it comes to compensation, they aren't always. And one of the times that they weren't, Davis Polk moved, and one of the times they weren't, Milbank moved.
And both of them have already put out these
Yeah.
fall bonuses. So I think that, if anything, I think this is a signal for the folks that have the capacity to give more money to do it, to really create this distinction between truly elite firms and sort of, the rest.
Yeah, no, I agree.
I mean, I think that's but I can't believe we almost forgot that there were bonuses last week, by the way.
I mean, it's
It's
astounding,
been that kind
right?
of week, you guys. It's been that kind of week.
Yeah. Oh, well. Okay. Well, with that, then, we should probably wrap up. So you should be listening to the show. Obviously, you should subscribe. You should write reviews, and give it stars, all of those things. That always helps for more people to find out about the show. You can also word of mouth it. That wouldn't hurt either. You should be reading Above the Law, as always. You can follow us on social media. I'm at Joseph Patrice. She's at Catherine1, the numeral 1. You should be listening to The Jabot, her podcast about diversity issues. I'm also on the Legal Tech Roundup podcast. You should be listening to the other shows from the Legal Talk Network, of course. You should be checking out Contract Tools by Paper Software, as we detailed earlier, and then remember that coupon code. And with all of that said...
Have a good week.
Yeah, I think that's right. Yeah.
If you'd like more information about what you've heard today, please visit LegalTalkNetwork.com. You can also find us at AboveTheLaw.com, ATLRedline.com, iTunes, RSS, Twitter, and Facebook. The views expressed by the participants of this program are their own and do not represent the views of, nor are they endorsed by, Legal Talk Network, its officers, directors, employees, agents, representatives, shareholders, and subsidiaries. None of the content should be considered legal advice. As always, consult a lawyer.
You're so ridiculous.